This is Dan. You're watching the Salty Sea, and I've got a real fun video in the works today. I've got a guest for this program. I'm gonna bring in Lila, also known as Mommy Slaanesh, in the Warcry Discord. By the way, everyone should check out the Discord. It's a great community. Lila, how about you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Lila. I've picked up Warcry as a pandemic hobby and fell in love with Slaanesh. And yeah, I'm Mommy Slaanesh. Also on Instagram as the lovely Medusa. So if you want to check out some of my paintings and some of my lizards, they're there. Yeah, and I'm real fucking psyched to be here. Oh, sorry, I
Cool.
probably can't swear, can I?
Uh, I'll try to bleep it out.
Okay,
Um,
okay.
it's fine. So
I will
yeah,
remember to
I'll link to
modulate
your
that.
Instagram down below in the comments, or yeah, so that people can check it out.
Yeah.
But I'm excited now that we've gotten um, a whole bunch of new tools for Slaanesh in the well, or at least for the mortal side in just the last 6 months or so. They feel like a totally different faction, so I'm excited to talk about them. Um, so I guess let's just kind of jump into the whys of Slaanesh. Like what brought you to the faction?
Um, Three simple words: gaslight, gatekeep, girl boss. Um, I think that Slaanesh. So I come from League of Legends, where I play
Mm-hmm.
Elise and Evelyn, who are two very like femme fatale type characters.
Sure.
And I think you actually did a very older video on how Slaanesh really taps into a lot of queer aesthetic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think, as someone who identifies with a lot of that, it really fit me. And also, like, who doesn't like androgynous demon ladies with crab claws? Like, come on, it's
So
great.
that was a part of it for me actually. So I had my Seraphon at the time, and which are I don't bring out anymore because the paint job on them is just awful. But I was telling my wife I wanted to get some bad guys, and this was back when she would still sometimes help me paint. So I was like,
Uh-huh.
what would you actually help paint? And I showed her like 12 different villainous factions, and she told me, I I wouldn't have thought so, but I kind of like the crab demons.
Yeah.
Um, and I really like them too. Especially starting to paint them. I had
Oh
a.
yeah.
I'll go into this more later, but I had this idea that I was going to paint every single one in a different color scheme, which was
Oh
not
yep.
sustainable, but was a ton
Uh,
of fun.
I've definitely thought about doing that with like groups of 10 demonettes, like
Mm-hmm.
painting up, because I have like 50 or 60 demonettes now. So I've
Yeah.
definitely thought about that. And I will say for Slaanesh, the crab claws, they're really nicely textured. Just getting into more of the technical painting side, they really take dry brushing well.
Yes, they do. I
Really
agree.
fun to dry brush.
And then the other thing I like about them, I guess this is probably tangential to what you were saying, is their aesthetic is just so different from everyone else in the setting, um, that they stand out in a really positive way to me that I really like.
Oh,
Uh,
absolutely.
yeah. So gameplay wise, I the gameplay actually was just almost a zero factor for me. I have a whole bunch of them, way more than you need in Warcry, and yet I don't care that they're completely unplayable in AOS at the moment.
Yeah, we could do an entirely different video on my gripes with Slaanesh and AOS, but
Yeah, yeah,
the good news is that both the demons and mortals are pretty workable in Warcry, I think,
absolutely.
as we'll get into. I think that this is if you are a Slaanesh lover and you are really sick of how they get treated in AOS, or you're really sick of how kind of I don't want to say I've heard they're a little bit boring in 40K, even though they're good. So if you're bored with that, come to Warcry. We've got Slaanesh goodies for days.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's just get straight into the demon side,
Right.
where we get to. we get to take advantage of probably the best, certainly the best control piece in the game. Whether it's the best heavy model, like over 200 point model, is sort of up for debate, but it's
I
absolutely up there and definitely
Well,
one of the
here's
tops
the
in the
thing
game.
about the contorted epitome. All those other 250, 300 point models become completely worthless if the epitome takes one look at them. And
Right.
she doesn't even have to roll dice. So I would say definitely one of the best. Maybe held back just a little bit by the fact that demonettes are pretty expensive for chaff.
Right.
But I think definitely definitely the best at what she does, like you were saying. And I would argue the best. She's the best in my heart, for sure.
Yeah. And you've probably played more Contorted Epitome than anyone else. I guess let's start with the list and then we'll
Okay,
talk
yep.
about playing it. Because there used to be, well, the Contorted Epitome took a 5 point nerf in the Toma Champions, which seems
Yeah.
like nothing, but the previous sort of Slaanesh Demon list is
I mean, it
exactly
was the
1k points.
list.
So yeah, and it was the list.
It was the only
All
list.
It was the only list because everything fit together so perfectly, right?
Yep.
So just a 5 point nerf actually blew up the entire thing. So I think we're kind of in agreement here. We actually, you and I talked about this list and made it. Man, this must be a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, like right after, I think right after the points changes got leaked,
Yeah.
honestly. Maybe right after the book came out.
Yeah, and so you've actually played this list since we
Uh, just
okay.
once and not against anything particularly competitive. It was against I would say like a B tier, B-ish range Skaven list. Had all
Hmm.
the giant rats, had the clan rats, had a rat ogre, but was lacking the packmaster.
Okay.
But yeah, still, it was, I played it against a 14 model list. Um,
Oof. Okay.
it felt amazing.
Hmm.
I think that the Blissbringer, when you look at it just compared next to a Fiend of Slaanesh in a vacuum, I think it's very clear that Blissbringer is not worth her points. You
Uh-huh.
get a 5 health upgrade, 1 more point of damage to the non-critical hit, and then 1 more attack, which is all the difference. But
Yeah.
practically speaking, because as you can see, I mean, if we want to go over here, we've just shaved off a demonette and upgraded a fiend to a Blissbringer from the old list.
Yep.
Very simple. I think she opens up a lot of avenues, and I would say this list is worse in a vacuum, but it feels a lot better to play because you now have this incredibly mobile threat unit that's
Hmm.
fairly good at mowing chaff and also fairly good at going toe to toe with medium sized and even some of the heavier units.
Yeah, that's what so, I've usually used a Blissbringer in my Slaanesh Demons lists. And the thing I like about it over a Fiend, I mean, I do like Fiends better, especially
Yeah,
point for point, but the thing I
they're
like
so
about it
efficient.
is, a Fiend, when it's using its double to kind of lock you in place, for people who don't know, the Fiends of Slaanesh have a double ability where they can stop you from disengaging, so they can walk up to you, start fighting you, and you can't run away. Um, so when a normal fiend does it, you're taking their most valuable piece and you're saying, listen, you have to spend the next 2 rounds clearing off this fiend, and it's going to take you forever, and you're probably going to win the fight eventually if you're one of the higher value targets, but it could end up taking you out of relevance the next couple rounds. A Blissbringer can do that, but it can also go and take a really high value target, like something that really wants to run away, and it can just say, actually, I'm going to lock you here so you can't get away, and I'm going to win the fight eventually.
Yeah.
Which I think is a really cool sort of. I mean, it's a second use for that ability, right? It's the same ability, but now it's playing two
Yep.
purposes instead of one, which is really nice.
Yeah. And I think that the Contorted Epitome has always really wanted to have another large fighter to kind of, it locks down something, it goes in, gets its like 6-2-4 attacks, right? And then you have this
Hmm.
Blissbringer that can also just charge in and kind of finish off this fighter. So you're not relying so much on winning priority,
Right.
every winning initiative.
Yeah,
Initiative.
because one thing
Yeah.
that can happen with the epitome, it's still absolutely worth it, but sometimes you get to that point where you lock them out of the round. Amazing, right? You've blown up their strategy, but now you have to win priority because some targets, if you go in, lock them down, they're right near you, and then if they win priority, and you've done this on something like a Varant Guard or a Storm Fiend, then all of a sudden they turn around and go, actually, I'm not locked in here with you. You're locked in here with me, and then you can end
Oh,
up in a
absolutely.
little bit of trouble. So that's cool to hear that having the Epitome and the Blissbringer kind of alleviates that problem.
Yeah, it's a combo that I think ages and ages and ages ago, like when Slaanesh Mortals first came out, I think you might have talked about, or we might have talked about, doing a oh, what's it called? The Slangor leader, the Slakehorn, as
Oh,
an
yep.
ally with the Epitome,
Hmm.
to kind of for a similar like hammer and anvil type
Yeah.
usage. So I think the Blissbringer really feels that role while also being a little bit more durable. And actually, I don't think it's. I'm not sure if it's more durable than the Slakehorn, but it is.
Yeah.
It is. It does have that extra use of still having that double, and it's 8-inch move.
Right. Right.
So it's still you still get this. You lose a demonette, but you gain this very nice. I wouldn't quite call her a dragon, but she's close.
Hmm.
Maybe a drake.
Yeah.
It's not quite on that damage level of like the Flesh Eater Quartz or the Gitz Squig Hopper, but she's
Right.
also a lot cheaper, and she also has that extra control element. So yeah, just like having her, you still get to set up your battle groups with a control piece in every battle group. Um, and like demonettes are still good. Like you lose one and it kind of sucks, but like they're still good. 5 is still good.
Yeah. And that kind of transitions me to wanting to talk about it's the strength and weakness of Slaanesh, where these demonettes, they're actually where most of your damage comes out of. I think a
Yep,
fiend and a demonette do the same amount of damage,
they
and
do. The
um,
demonette can even go higher if she uses her double to
oh
become
right,
2/5
you're
instead
right.
of she gets the added +1 to her hits,
Hmm.
+1 damage.
And so one of the cool sort of strengths of this faction is if you apply every unit so that they're using their strengths and not having to get their weaknesses exposed, um, it works as a machine and it's really terrifying for your opponent. But one of the one of the weaknesses is other than that Blissbringer, you really don't have any units that have any kind of all around sort of ability to them,
Yeah.
right? Like demonettes are incredible as damage, but they just, I mean, once your opponent can fight back against them, they really start to disappear quickly. And then,
Yeah.
same with the epitome a little bit too. And then if your fiend is in a situation where it's got to all of a sudden try to be a hammer, it's just not going to achieve that.
Yeah, it definitely gives your opponents a lot of pretty clear spots to try and hit the list. Uh,
Hmm.
like when I would play Slaanesh, the old list with 60 minutes, one of the things that we found was like a Varren guard with the leader triple from Slaves to Darkness, where they get the extra the extra attack and move if they kill a unit. That was very good against. He would just mow down my demonettes, and then that's like where all my damage comes from. So now I can't deal with
Right.
this Varren guard or these armored Chaos Warriors. Yeah. So I think another large weakness, since we're talking about the demonettes too, is
Hmm.
so they're very good damage, but they are 4-3-1-4. So a lot of that damage is backloaded onto the crit,
Right.
which means that you're really, and especially with 3 strength, you're really relying on rolling 5s and 6s on these. Even against other chaff, you're usually rolling 4s.
Right.
So, well, the list, when you pull it up statistically, it deals a pretty good average spread of damage. It also feels so bad, and it's so easy to just go in and get completely diced where you roll. I've had it happen where even the epitome rolls 6 dice and just completely whiffs her attack because she's against something with even 4 toughness, and you're rolling on 5s and 6s, and those can be hard to hit sometimes. And then you have the other side of the table where I've had a demonette deal 20 damage,
Nice.
like just crit, just like 1 attack, 4 crits, next attack like 2 crit. Like, yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, and I do think that's where you were talking about the old list being more powerful in a vacuum. That's where just having those extra numbers
Yeah,
kind of lets it makes the dice smooth out over time more quickly, right? Because you're just
yeah,
rolling more dice. Because man, it can be tough. It can also be tough to sort of some factions, you know what attacks to put on what.
yeah,
Whereas Slaanesh, you really are gambling with every with every roll, so you don't.
yeah.
It's harder to plan ahead of time a little bit.
Luckily, I think the disruption tends to make up for that. It's very easy for a large threat unit to just, with the epitome on the board, it is very easy. And I've had it happen in games where an opponent maybe gets 1 battle round out of their 300-point unit, where I'm shutting it down about every round, and if not with the epitome, then with like a bliss or like the fiend's
Right.
ability, because you can 8-inch move into combat range into 1 inch, use the crushing grip, the can't move or disengage on the double if you don't roll a 1, which I mean it's better than,
Yeah.
it's a shorter range, but it's better than most of the other net abilities.
Yeah.
And then you just disengage back 3 inches, and it's like, okay, I've basically done the epitome here.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can still wait with that unit, which, so it's like not as good as the epitome, but like it's still so yeah, it makes up for the fact that the damage is very dicey, because it does have ways to pretty effectively just shut off points, which I think is
Right.
something pretty unique to Slaanesh.
Yeah. And something that's really I don't know if that was supposed to be part of what they do in AOS. I know they have that locus ability that says fight last.
Yeah,
Um,
I I don't know what Slaanesh is supposed to be
yeah.
doing in AOS. I
But
don't think
I
nothing.
really like I do feel like the play style is cohesive and sort of fits a vision here where it's speed control. It's
Yep.
it's not sort of mono blue to take the magic
Yeah.
parlance, but it's sort of like an is it delver. Like you are throwing a lot of damage around with these demonettes, but it's all about your speed and your control elements. And
Yeah, I was gonna say it
yeah.
reminds me of like Splinter Twin.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly,
Yes.
it's like Splinter Twin, or like is it Phoenix, or like,
Yep.
well, yeah, we shouldn't get too into the magic terms because now we're getting very deep into two different.
Right,
Uh,
right.
but yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it's definitely it's a tempo based list, which I think is something that definitely carries over. Where because of the mobility and the disruption and kind of this inherent glass cannon,
Mm-hmm.
uh, if I'm doing like treasure or like pretty much most of the objectives, I'm looking to get a very early lead, first or second round, and
Mm-hmm.
then I'm just basically looking to maintain that lead. I'm not looking to go any high. Like I'm basically looking, if we're talking about objectives, right? I'm basically looking to win victory points on the first 2 rounds and be ahead by 1 or 2 victory points and just hold that lead for the rest of the game.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
even if my forces get whittled down. Because
Yeah,
if I
and your
can just kind of
speed.
blitz,
Mm-hmm.
and then if I can blitz and then change gears into control and kind of make them come to me after a certain point, because my units are faster, and also I have all these control elements. So it really does play, I think, in a very unique way to most of Age of Sig or most of Warcry.
Yeah. So we've talked a ton of tips for playing Slaanesh, and yet not gotten to either of the two that we had planned to talk
Yeah,
about. So
true.
real quick, I'll cover the Tokyo Drift, and then
Okay.
you'll talk about dice. So
Yep.
by Tokyo Drift, all I mean is when you use fiends, they're on these huge bases that on a Warcry board take up quite a bit of space. Now they're kind of skinny, which is nice for getting through choke points, but then they're really long, and you can uh, I call it the Tokyo Drift, where you come in and slide sideways to cut
Yep.
off a choke point. And I find fiends to be really good for that because, you cut off the point and then they last for a long time. And sometimes, you force like three chaff units all hammering at the fiend at once to try to get into a new part of the board. But what were you going to say as far as sort of choosing how you're going to use your dice?
Right. Oh, I just wanted to mention real quick that Epitome is on, I believe, the same size base too. So while
Hmm.
she's I mean, she's 2 point. She's a little bit more valuable than a fiend. You don't want to throw her, but you can Tokyo Drift with the Epitome as
Right.
well.
Hmm.
And sometimes you might be able to bait your opponent into a really bad choke point, because a lot of opponents that I've played against really tunnel vision on killing the Epitome,
Yeah, which makes
which is
sense.
kind of what I wanted to talk about. So
Hmm.
I think that with the Epitome, there's this uh, misconception in the community that the Epitome uses her triple every single round, and that you should always be using the Epitome triple every single round. And you can make the Epitome triple every single round, but I think that it's a little bit of a trap most of the times. And I think that what separates a good Epitome player from a great Epitome player is actually knowing when you can afford to use your dice for other abilities or to just take initiative
Hmm.
when you kind of leave that triple behind in rounds, because realistically, you do not need to be. It makes for a funny story, but you do not need to be shutting down your opponent's leader every single turn for battle.
Uh-huh.
Like that is, and I think that the temptation with the Epitome is to overkill on it,
Yeah.
but you have a lot of other really good abilities in Slaanesh. The faction double half the value of the dice to the next move action. That's very good,
Yep.
especially since these units are already mobile. You can give a demonette an 8-inch move. You can give a fiend like an 11-inch move. It's crazy.
Yeah.
The fiend double oftentimes will work just as well as the epitome triple, and then that's a dice that you've saved. Quads are always worth considering as well. The Blissbringer, that's another nice thing about the Blissbringer, is the Blissbringer is probably the best thing in this list to rampage.
Yep.
Because she has super great movement, 5 attacks. So, if you can move 8 inches and get in range with the thing, that's 15 attacks you're getting off with her at 2/4. And it's more for the epitome is slightly better to rampage if we're just looking at it from like a pure stats and numbers point. But I think that rampaging the epitome usually isn't the best idea, just because it puts her in a lot of danger.
Right.
Depends on what you're rampaging into. But yeah, just not super complicated. It's kind of more just a feel thing and a case by case board state. But just when you're using the epitome in a list, always think about like, do I need this triple? What am I using it for? Be very intentional with using it. Don't just use it because triples do take. I didn't even talk about the demonettes. Like the main way that you do more consistent damage with them is using the double to give them +1
Yeah.
damage to their crits and hits. Uh, so yeah, like the list can definitely be a bit ability hungry, and it also really wants to go first a lot of the time.
Hmm.
So figuring out situations where you don't need the triple for the epitome uh, is generally, I think, one of the big skill ceilings with the lists.
Yeah.
And just in case anyone's curious, as a metric, I would say on average, I use the epitome ability 2.5 times during a game, over like a bunch of games. It's
Okay.
you. The most common amount of times that I use it is two battle rounds.
Okay.
Usually the
Yep.
first battle round, and then at some later point.
Hmm. All right. So I think we've covered sort of the main stuff for Slaanesh Demons, I think, as much as possible, which is awesome. So for any other stuff, do you like the Infernal and Rapturous? I remember when it came out, there just weren't a lot of these -1 attack AoEs out there.
Yeah,
And just as time has gone on, it just feels like they're just attached to the wrong fighters. Like, because you don't
yeah,
really want the Enraptress in, like, in the thick of the fighting, right?
yeah,
Um, though that shooting attack isn't as bad as the usual mage shooting attack.
yeah. It's a little bit better, and I think I had mistakenly said to you at one point that they had increased the Interactress's points. They actually decreased her by 5 points. She went down 5 points. She was at 170. For some reason,
Mm-hmm.
I thought she was 160. So she's 165 now. Um, and I know one of the lists that you talked about in, I don't remember which of your videos, about the double Enraptress list with kind of a demonette spam,
Mm-hmm.
with then two Enraptresses for the ability. I think that that list can work. I think it plays very different. I think it plays more like a typical control list,
Yeah.
where you basically just establish a perimeter and kind of let your opponent trickle into you, to really get the most value out of the Enraptress. So I don't think that it would work particularly well in every scenario. I think the contorted epitome list is way more consistent, but if you're looking for something that's fun, kind of still has that same control element to it, uses the Rapturous is a great model. If you just want to put her on the table,
Yeah.
I think that I think she's fine. I think you can run that two list. I think you can go all in on her, and I think you'll have a pretty good time.
Yeah, the only time I recommend it is when you want the same thing, but your opponents are just
Oh
really
yeah,
if they're like the kind of knee jerk or if if the stuff that they have available to them just isn't capable of hanging with an epitome list,
of
I think
course.
Enraptress can get you the same place, well, not the same play style, but a similar play style, with the same
Yeah,
faction.
or the Blissbringer list that you mentioned too.
Yeah.
I think that one can still do 60 minutes as well, right? Blissbringer 2 Fiends 60 minutes.
Yep, that's the one
Yeah.
of basically you just take the old list and swap the epitome out for a
Yep.
Blissbringer.
And
Yeah.
I think that's also a fine time.
Hmm. All right, so let's talk about the mortals,
Ooh,
who
yes.
came into the game in just kind of an awful place, and have
Oh,
gotten
yep, they
some.
were awful.
They were awful, and they've gotten stealth buffs here and there, just kind of a trickle of support that I think has made
Yeah.
them just much more playable and much more workable than they used to be. It started
Um,
with the errata to flip
yeah.
two of their triples to doubles, which helped a little bit, not
Oh,
a ton.
absolutely. They were glutted with triples. I mean, it wasn't even
Hmm.
necessarily that the triples were. I mean, obviously, triples to doubles are great, when you're just looking at it from an action economy standpoint. But also, they had so many triples
Yeah,
that it was like you would put together a list with all these different fighters, and they'd all be competing for which one got to actually use their abilities. So
yeah.
yeah, um,
Um,
yep,
but then, so fast forward maybe another 4 or 5 months after that, we get Bladeborn, or maybe it was like 6 months after that, but we get Bladeborn, which
yep,
brought in the Dread Pageant, which,
so good.
yeah, they're really above the curve for what else Slaanesh is doing. So before we get into TOC changes, let's talk about the Dread Pageant.
Okay.
Because I've only played with them once, but you've played with them a few more times than that, right?
I've played with them a few times, a
Okay.
few different lists. I don't think that I have as good of a read on the Mortals list as I do on the Demons list. I have a
Mm-hmm.
lot less experience. I've played with Hanzu once, and I played with Glissette and Slake Slash the most. I've
Right.
used Vazalok maybe twice. Um, yeah,
So Vasilok, for me, um, at first I didn't like it compared to the Lord of Pain,
right.
because it's way less damage, um, and you just get, you get the toughness, one wound, which is meaningless, and then one movement. Um, I've
I like.
actually found, so in the game I played was on a red harvest board.
Okay.
Now, I don't know in the base game if I think it would matter less, but in Red Harvest, it's funny because you get the longer round times, which are
Right. Is
less.
it five?
It's four, but it's four for
Four.
everything. It's
Okay.
never going to be
Yeah, it's
three.
never three. Okay.
Um,
So
and
toughness. Yeah.
so it's a little bit more forgiving for really slow warbands because you have more time to just sort of beeline straight to where you need to be. But
Right.
because there's so much terrain and there's a lot of the sort of scenarios have lots of different things you can go get, um, there's a lot to do with extra movement if you have it that you just kind of ignore because you're priced in if you don't have it. And
Yeah.
so Vasilok was actually able to do quite a bit as far as sort of going, tagging one objective, then actually going and tagging another objective before getting to a team fight. Um, and so I think that that extra move is pretty relevant. I think, you know, when it's only five more points for a Slakehorn, maybe that debate is a little bit sort of
Yeah.
off to the side, because I do think the Slakehorn is stronger than both.
Slakecorn is so good.
Yeah.
I think that like I see you have it on here. I think that the Lord of Pain ability really pushes it over.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the ability is a better version of Locus of Pain. Oh gosh, Locus of Depravity, is that it?
Yeah.
The locus for the demons, which is an ability that I've always thought has been almost there, but also it kind of sucks that it's useless in some cases. Like if you're against Night Haunt, they have no like toughness four fighters basically. Like the
Right.
ability is just useless. So I think that the Lord of Pain one, which I believe is strength equal to half the value of the dice, or
Yep.
just the straight up value of the dice. I think that's really good in faction, and it also, I know you've covered this before, it creates a really great kind of 1-2 punch with the Mirmadesh Painbringers, who have the same ability as the Demonettes, where it's a double to add one to their hits and criticals.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Um, but at the same time, it's a triple and it's a situational triple that is best when it's paired with a double. So it's not. Yeah, I think that I would say personally, with Vasilak and Lord of Pain being at 205 each, like just pick whichever one you like best. Pick whichever model you like best. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
And also the Lord of Pain is incredible. That ability is incredible in some situations, but also we don't get a lot of numbers with Sybarites. It's really
yeah,
hard to
true.
get a list with more than nine, and
Yeah.
that's
And
with
we'll
if you're using Bliss Barbs that aren't very good.
Yeah. And we'll talk about this, but yeah, the Lord of Pain is kind of a non-bow in his own faction.
Right.
I actually like him significantly more. This could have been something that we talked about as an alternate list for demons. I like him significantly more as an ally for demons. I think he'd be great with just like 9 demon heads.
Oh, that actually sounds amazing. Yes.
Like an Allure or even a Infernal and Rapturous, and then
Uh-huh.
Lord of Pain, and then however many demonettes you can fit in there, just a
Yeah.
bunch of stabby ladies just stabbing. I think that would be incredible.
That sounds cool. I want to try that. I think,
Yeah,
yeah.
because like it's just a better version of Locus of Depravity, and I think that ability for Demonettes is super good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, so Basilak, he's an improve. I think just having the other option is nice, but I also don't think that leaders is where Sybarites was struggling. So
Right. Yeah. So let's get
yeah,
into the troops. So Hadzu is kind of interesting. I think Hadzu was actually a big winner of the Blitzbarb Archer nerf, even though it was only
Had,
five
yeah.
points. Um,
hmm Hadzu really impressed me in the
yeah.
one game that I played with him. I played against Skaven.
Hmm.
Having, was it, 3 attacks, 3 strength, 1 4 damage. Having 1 4 damage on a fighter that can hit you from 15 inches away felt very good. He came on the board round 2, did not move, and took out like 3 giant rats and put a pretty significant dent onto a clan rat or a storm vermin. Sorry, I think it was a storm, the bigger one.
Right, right. Um, yeah, and then the fact that I mean, looking in faction, right? The fact that he
Mhm.
compares so well to the Blitzbarb Archer leader, um,
Yeah,
because those
for 15 less.
right for those fewer points or for those fewer wounds, you really don't want Hadzu, in a fight anyway.
Yeah. The wounds don't, I mean, the 4 wounds don't really matter. Like,
Mhm.
he's just, like, the Blissfire High Temptress is just as prone to getting quadded by an FEC bat or a Squig Hopper or a Doom Bull as he is.
Right.
Like you don't, yeah, the wounds on the, it's kind of why I hate that, like, the mounted archers, basically
Yes.
all their points are going into move and wounds, which are the 2 least important things for a ranged character to have.
Yep. Yep.
uh yeah, I think Hadzu is a huge winner. I think he felt, playing him in that list made me wonder if I wanted to free up room to have a Blissbarb High Temptress in that list as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Just to have a second
having the
Hadzu.
option, having the ranged option as just like the one ranged option in like a, because all ranged felt terrible. We'll get into that with the Blissbarbs.
Yeah.
All ranged half felt terrible, but having the one as an option to just kind of sit back and snipe while while your Slangors and your Painbringers or your Twin Souls kind of soften them up, felt very good.
Nice.
Hadzu, big overperformer and I mean, I only have 1 game sample size, so I mean, take this all with a grain of salt,
Yeah.
but big overperformer for me, and I think I'll be very happy to field him again in the future.
Nice. And then Slake Slash is based on probably the strongest. I don't know why I'm
Oh
thinking of
yeah,
chassis, but like the strongest sort of base profile that we've got in the
yeah.
faction, which is Fiendbloods. Um,
Which is funny
I'm.
because they're terrible in Age of
I
Sigmar.
know.
And
I've
they're
heard.
so good. They're the backbone. I would almost say they're the backbone of Sybarite. They were what
Hmm.
were carrying Sybarites for a very long time to being
Right.
even remotely playable.
And so, um, I'm actually so it's funny. Slake Slash might be the best of the Dread Pageant, and yet when I'm building lists, he's often the first one I cut now, um,
Uh-huh.
just
He's the
because.
most expensive besides Vasilok,
Right.
who fills your leader quota.
Yeah, and you know, just regular ones for 165 are so tempting, but that extra 2 damage on average is quite a bit. So,
Yeah.
when you've played
I
him, like, what do you think?
He feels like how I've heard people describe Sigvald in Age of Sigmar.
Okay.
You get Slake Slash on the board. He goes really far. With a double, you can move him 12 inches and still get
Mm-hmm.
an attack off. You can move him, the Fiendblood double in general is just really
It's
good.
crazy. Yeah.
So I just use him to hunt down priority things, preferably like smaller. So like he's really good when you have units that are running away carrying treasure. He's really good for just solo getting on a point that's just kind of maybe protected by like 3 or 4 chaff models and just going to town.
Yeah.
Um, he is kind of like the unit, how I've used him anyway. And again, I have a lot less experience with mortals, so like take this all with a grain of salt. The way that I've used him is as kind of a distraction Carnifex, where he
Mm-hmm.
goes and gets the job done by himself, and meanwhile, I'm focusing the rest of my resources on another part of the board.
Yeah.
And I think he's great. Whether or not he's better than a Fiend Blood, I mean, I think he's scarier, and I think he
Yeah.
looks better, so I like him. But I can definitely see why you would cut him, because aside from Vasilak, who again, as I said, does fill that leader quota, uh, he is the most expensive member, so he's the hardest to just slot in. And I think it's pretty easy to look at like him and be like, oh, I could go down a little bit of value to a Fiend Blood, which is what, 30 less points?
Mm-hmm.
20, 30, 30, I think 165, right? For the
Yeah.
Fiend Blood. Uh, 30 less points. And if that 30 points is the difference between fitting in, say, like an eighth or ninth fighter, uh, that's definitely a consideration. I'll probably keep using him because of style points, though. I think he's fantastic.
I do think he looks better than regular Fiend Bloods, even though I think Fiend Bloods look cool too.
Yeah. He
Um,
has a better claw.
and the one thing you mentioned that I wanted to repeat is the fact that he's better at clearing chaff is important.
It really is.
Yeah.
He can. I don't think I would send. I don't think. I usually do not. I usually use my Fiend Bloods in a fairly similar way where I use them to hunt down priority targets.
Uh-huh.
They're kind of hero slayers. Because they stack up pretty well at fighting mid-sized units, and the fact that they can use their double to move in and still get 2 attacks means that you don't have that inherent disadvantage of being the person who's kind of being kited.
Yeah.
But I don't usually send a Fiend Blood onto a point that's being guarded by like 5 giant rats and just tell him to get to work,
Right.
So yeah, he's great for that.
And then last, I just want to hit Glissette and my kind of hot take on Glissette. I think Glissette is the strongest unit in the faction. Unfortunately,
Okay.
she's so small and she's sort of
Yeah.
almost designed to be kind of a low impact utility piece that you don't
Yeah.
feel her transforming your list because she's
Uh-huh.
just a small melee piece. But I just found between the 5-inch move and 2-inch range,
Right.
and the kind of shocking amount of damage that she can put out, just that her sort of utility effect on the game is just so much higher than, like, I'd rather have her at 105. Even if she cost 115, I'd still rather have her than the Twin Soul at 115.
That's fair. And again, this is probably due to playing a pretty limited number of games with her. Pretty much every game that I've played with Glissette, she's died almost immediately. She's just been alpha striked immediately. She does not stay alive for pretty long.
Yeah.
I am pretty sure that the only time that I got to attack with her in the game that I played, she attacked into the Storm Vermin or whatever that like mid-sized rat is.
Yeah.
Got 5 damage on him and then immediately got attacked back for all of her health.
Oh no.
So I agree with. I think if she had that rule that some of them have, I think if I could take more than one of her, then I completely agree with you. At the one of point, I'm including her in all my lists, so you're probably still right, to be honest. But like, I'm not looking at her as a big MVP in my list as just the one of.
She just becomes another target, and if you have other must-kill units, she, I think, takes some of the pressure off of them.
Especially especially because like Slaanesh does not. When you're building a Sybarites warband, it's not like building another warband where you go, okay, I'm gonna have 5 ghouls or 5 demonettes or 5 this, and this.
Right.
You're kind of having to build your own chaff out of horrible pieces. The faction Sybarites, biggest glaring weakness. Let's put it up in a red flag, red stop sign, red text, all that. No good chaff.
Yeah.
Terrible chaff.
So I just wanted to put those lists up so that people could see kind of what you were talking about. But
right, and I'll get into mine versus yours when we get back to that list too, because there was a point that I thought of after I saw that I did want to bring up. But yeah,
so we've already talked Fiend Bloods already, but let's just have the Blissbarb conversation now.
Okay.
So
yep, they're terrible.
They're terrible. So
they're so bad. Some other factions, I think, like, I mean, when you look at it before, right? They're an Ungor Raider with like 1 extra move. They're a Dark Shard for like, I don't know how much Dark Shards went up. I would assume only 5, so like they were 75. I assume they're 80 now. Right. They're a Dark Shard for like 5 more points. Like, they're possibly the worst. I don't know if they're the worst ranged unit in the game, but they're definitely worst in show for like that kind of series of like small chaff ranged units.
Yeah. I had
Uh,
a bit of a so you'll see, or people will see, my list here involves bliss barbs, but
yep.
um, I was I was having a bit of an epitome last night
Ep-
playing
Epiphany.
Slaanesh in prep for this
I
video.
think the contorted is getting into your head there.
Yeah. But I was thinking last night while sort of playing Slaanesh, prepping for this video, um, that something that really I think punishes. So, okay. So to back up, the Tome of Champions nerfed a bunch of shooting because gun lines were providing a lot of NPE for sort of new players. Untuned lists really struggle against gun lines.
Yeah.
You know,
Some of the gun lines were genuinely good.
yeah,
Like you put a Caradron leader in with like, 6 or 7 skinks and give him that fight for profit and they just go to town.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, skinks especially were very, very good. And then you
Yeah.
could make a
Best
pretty
in
good,
show for range chaff,
yeah,
by the way.
and you could put a pretty good Cities of Sigmar gun line together too if you wanted
Yeah.
to. Um, but the thing that hurts sort of weaker archers in Warcry is the fact that you can leave an objective and you still own the objective. So
Uh-huh.
if you tag an objective, sit there on round one, in round two, if your opponent isn't a threat to go take it, because a lot of games in Warcry are like there's 4 objectives, 2 of them are being contested, and 2 of them are just comfortably owned by one player, right? So each
Yep.
player comfortably owns one of them, and then 2 of them are being legitimately contested.
Right, because you
Um,
only have enough resources to basically fight like 1.5 big battles when
right,
you really dole out the models. Yeah.
right. And so the fact that melee units can go take an objective and then go join a fight elsewhere really takes some of the value off of something like a Bliss Barb, where it's really paying for some
Yeah.
of that movement, some of the fact that another shooter can't quite as easily shoot it off the objective as they could, say, a skink. Um,
Right.
and it doesn't do much damage, and so normally you'd be sitting on an objective pot shotting at another objective, and that's a huge thing in Age of Sigmar, right? Is having
Right.
like I think Vinci V calls them like deck chair sitters, but
Right. 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 Yeah.
so you don't
But
really
that's
need
not
that as much in Warcry.
yeah, that's not really how objectives work in Warcry
Hmm.
because the we don't have like a charge phase.
Right,
We don't have all these extra combat rules that I think makes archers really good in Warcry. We don't have Unleash Hell.
right. And the only scenario where I think archers are kind of busted is the ones the sort of there's objective scenarios, and then there's also kind of the area capture ones, like the one where they split the board in 4 corners,
Yeah, yep, those
um,
are good for archers.
and the other one where it's whoever owns the most platforms. So you want to be able to be on a platform
Yeah,
hurting another platform.
yep.
Um,
But I think that even
yeah,
if we're talking about archers as being better than melee units, I think Blizzbards still suck.
yeah,
I don't think there's any world, I don't think there's any argument that you can make. This is how bad they are. Is I genuinely don't think that there is any argument that you can make for having them as the backbone of your war bands. And I think, I mean, you and I both kind of came to the same list before Tome of Champions, which was essentially Dread Pageant plus 4 Bliss Barbs and like maybe Slangor Fiendblood as well.
hmm,
And like, I think we both ended up playing that list and we're like, this is terrible.
yeah,
Like,
hmm,
I mean, like it's the best list that we have mathematically, but the archers do nothing.
right,
And having them be that backbone of your list is terrible because okay, we're going to talk about okay, they're slightly better at like staying on one point and shooting at another point. They're terrible at holding points. They're terrible
yeah,
at going in and wresting points away from people. And when that is half of your warband is just terrible at holding points, like good luck on any of the objectives.
yeah,
They're also like paper. They die really quickly. They really do not do any damage. The kind of like the triple kind of this is what we give ranged units instead of onslaught ability, where it's like half attacks, half the value of the dice attacks to the next attack ability is just
Yep.
so wasted on them. Where like it's so good on like a Raptor Hurricane
Yeah.
because that thing packs actual damage,
Right, right.
but it has low amounts of attacks. Whereas these things, like fairly high attacks, I think it's 3 or 4 attacks, but just super low damage
And what you just said about that ability, I think
and low toughness
is
or low
why
strength.
is why the Blissbarb leader and Hadzu are sort of more respectable
Yeah,
than regular Blissbarbs are, even though they cost more. Um, they each
the ability
cost
is more of a threat.
Yeah, they each cost 1.5 Blissbarbs, but they do more than they do as much as 2 Blissbarbs, costing
They
as
do as
much as
much. I
one.
mean, honestly, they do as much as 3 Bliss Barbs because Bliss
Yeah.
Barbs just do so little. Um, yeah, no, I'm very down on Bliss Barbs, and
Yeah.
we'll get to that in your list. I do not think that you should be running them at all, but I want to hear your reasoning for it. I can assume why you're running them. I want to hear that, but yeah.
Okay.
The next point, I think that's the Bliss Barb combo. I think any more of this is just going to be going around in the same circle of, wow,
Yeah.
these things suck.
Yeah.
Actually, sorry, let me say, Bliss Barb archers suck. As much as Bliss Barb archers suck, though, I don't think that they suck quite as much as Bliss Barb seekers, which not
Yes.
only have the same damage profile, and again, as we say, like kind of a useless amount of extra points. They're
Yeah.
double the points, or I guess they're not really double, or maybe they went up again. I don't know, but they're basically double the points for 20 wounds instead of 8, and so 12 more wounds, and then like 10 more move or something, or like 10 move versus 5, I think. So like, but like those are the two most worthless stats for a ranged character to have. And
hmm
then on top of that, their damage profile is exactly the same. And then if that wasn't enough, they cost exactly the same. Or I guess maybe if they got nerfed, I haven't checked. Now they cost more than a Slangor Fiendblood, who already is like worth triple that thing.
Right.
But why we're not having the Bliss Barb Seeker convo is because those might as well just not exist in Warcry because we all know that they're bad.
Because
Like,
GW has such a tough time knowing what to do with cavalry. Um,
yeah.
the
And I
mount
think Bliss
keyword
Barb
is so
Seekers are actually
weird.
good in AOS, but that's a
Yeah.
completely different thing. Or they could be good anyway.
Yeah, and I
If Slaanesh
specifically
didn't
just
suck
mean,
overall.
yeah, in Warcry, where the mount keyword, you know, how much it
Yeah.
cripples a unit really depends on the board.
Yeah, and
Depend.
there's not a lot of definition to what mount is a drawback keyword.
hmm
There's not a lot of definition to what mount actually is or does. You get like the Blissbarb Seekers or the Slaanesh Seekers or the Hellstriders that have mount, but they have like 10 move, which is more than they would normally get for those points. But
hmm
then you have like the Seraphon, like the Saurus Knights that have like 6 move and their
Yep.
point, and it's like why is this so much worse?
And you
Like
have
it
Dracoline
doesn't.
riders that are riding
Yeah,
something, but they're not mounted because I
but
guess
they're not mounted.
Dracolines are very agile.
Yeah,
But then,
but then the exact basically the exact same thing in Chaos, the Chaos Lord on Karkadrak, which is like basically the same thing as a
right.
Dracoline, to be honest, is mounted, even though it's climbing
Yeah,
something
it's
and
literally
it's climbing a
climbing on the
rock.
base, but it gets the mount keyword. It's so
Yeah,
painful. That
it's
thing would be so
painful.
good if it wasn't mounted.
Oh my
Um,
God, it's so good even though it is like it's
it's still playable, yeah.
honestly like it's so good if there wasn't the Varen Guard.
Yeah.
But that's yeah, we're getting off topic with that. Yeah. So
Um,
anyway,
yeah, wildly off
Bliss
topic. I
Barb's
do
bad.
think, yeah, you're right. Like, specifically the Slaanesh ones, even if they didn't have the mount keyword, they'd still be bad.
Yep.
So no reason to have our big
Yeah.
anti-mount
I don't
conversation
know why
now.
they don't have. I don't know why they don't have the AOS thing where like the mounts can attack or the mounts add something to the damage profile. Like
Yeah.
that seems reasonable to me. That thing can look at it. It can bite. We're literally looking at it right now.
It's
Like that thing looks
opening its mouth,
terrifying.
and its rider's head would fit in between its jaws. It
Yeah,
would
that thing
definitely
looks
be a
terrifying,
threat.
and you're telling me that that thing does nothing in combat. Okay, and it even does in AOS. Like it has
Yep.
an attack. So
hmm
yeah, no, that's stupid. But anyway, okay, Bliss Barb's bad. Bliss Barb Seekers worse. T5 buff with Painbringers versus Twin Souls, or rather Painbringers points adjustments
Right.
because they
So
were bad.
they were terrible before because they were at 145 points, which I think essentially made them unplayable. I do think now, and I think
Yeah.
you're still higher on them than I am, but I
I'm
do think they're playable.
Yeah. I'm
Um,
probably much higher on them than you are.
so
I also just really like the models.
yeah, they do look cool. So basically, before they were kind of weaker in every way, but now I wanted to just throw the math up here. Basically, Twin Souls do more damage, but the gap is a lot less than it used to be. And given that they're the same price, um, it can be really interesting, sort of based on basically what's a metagame situation in terms of survivability, right? Because a Twin Soul is, at toughness 4 is going to be just as much of a brick wall to chaff as a Painbringer is, but against sort of
Right.
more mixed warbands, like you were
Yeah.
saying, the Painbringer might be a
And
different
that's
experience.
kind of my point with the Painbringers is a lot of lists run these dragons
Mm-hmm.
that are generally they fall somewhere in the range of they're flying or they're mounted, and they have 4 or 5 attacks, and they're usually strength 4 or 5 for like 2-4 damage.
Right.
And strength 4 chaff or toughness 4 chaff falls apart completely to those dragons, I
Mm-hmm.
think. And like, yeah, you can get crit out, but like T5 is good. It's just that we haven't seen, we're just now seeing toughness 5 units that are appropriately costed to be toughness 5.
Right. I will probably be taking a toughness 5 unit to Adepticon, and I would not
Okay.
have. Yeah. So they're not all trash, I guess is what I'm
No,
saying.
not all
Yeah, I
trash at
agree with
all.
you
I think
there.
that they're kind of this conventional Warcry wisdom of like T5 is never worth it, shields are never worth it. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's worth going back and looking at some of the shield options because I think that once the trade-off is more in the stats instead of in the points, which is what I think they did for the most part,
Yeah.
is they have, you're trading, you have toughness 5, but maybe you have less attacks. But when you're looking at something that you want to be like a wall, like you want,
Mm-hmm.
like the difference between T5, the difference between T4, T3 to T4 is really big. The difference between T4 to T5 is less big, but you also have to remember that a lot of these factions are running these kind of strength 4 or 5 hitter units that are, can just get kind of stonewalled by these 15 health T5 Painbringers.
And
And then
be
the Painbringer whacks back, and like they don't do as much damage as Twin Souls, but they sure do damage.
mm-hmm. And because Slaanesh has so many fewer models than a lot of factions are capable of putting out there,
Yeah,
sometimes, you know, keeping each one alive might be a little bit more important than it would be
absolutely.
otherwise.
Absolutely. I had my Painbringers did very well against Skaven. And this was kind of one where it was like mostly versus the Rat Ogre shooting,
Mm-hmm.
which was great. He had the shooting Rat Ogre, which is a 5 strength, 5 strength 3/6 cannon attack. And it just wasn't doing anything against my T5 Painbringer. Like he just could not roll fours against it.
Right.
And it just shredded my other guy. Like, yeah.
I actually
Um,
had a awkward situation where I had a Painbringer get chunked down by a squig in a place where the toughness didn't matter, and then I
uh-huh.
had a Twin Soul get chunked down by Snirk Sour Tongue in a place where a Painbringer would have been fine.
Yeah, I mean
So,
that's always
so
the thing with
there's
trade-offs
yeah.
is that you're always going to have situations where one would have been better than the other and you're
Mm-hmm.
going to be like, "Oh, damn, I should have really taken this other one." I would
Yeah.
say kind of the same thing that I said with Vasilek. Choose the one that fits your playstyle better. Choose
Yeah.
the one whose models you like more. There's a trade-off now and it's not you're not losing, and I wouldn't say that you're really losing out by taking Painbringers over Twin Souls or Twin Souls over Painbringers. I would say it's more just a matter of taste.
Right. And I think that that's one of the cool things about Sybarites is how many decisions you get to make
Yeah,
with
the Underworld's
each
warband.
available point. Yeah.
Yep.
Because, you know, whether you want to upgrade from or downgrade from, as far as like the Twin Soul with Lash to the 130 point fighters to the Fiend Blood versus
Mhm.
Slakehorn, like you have, yes, you don't have chaff to spam, but that kind of gives you a more interesting set of decisions because you have so many options in that kind of
Yeah.
one points range. So let's talk about these
Yeah.
lists.
So, can I go over my argument against your two Bliss Barb Archers
Sure,
here?
sure.
So, your two Bliss Barb Archers, they're getting you one more fighter than my warband,
Hmm.
right? It's 7 versus 8, I believe.
Or isn't it?
So,
Oh yeah, seven
uh,
versus 8. Hmm.
7 versus 8. So you're getting one more fighter. But let's look at it this way, okay? If you look at my list compared to yours, I'm running Slangor Slakecorn, which I think we both pretty much unanimously said is better than Lord
Hmm.
of Pain. Slake Slash, who is not as efficient, but damn it, if we're looking at just pure stats, is more powerful than Slangor Fiendblood.
Hmm.
I'm running two Mirmadesh Painbringers. You're running a Lash and a Painbringer, so I still get the Lash, and I'm running another Mirmadesh, who is way better than a Bliss Barb Archer. So all you're getting over me is one more unit, and that unit is a Bliss Barb Archer. And we've already said that Bliss Barb Archers, I would say that your two Bliss Barb Archers count as like maybe 1.5 fighters, if we're being honest.
Fair enough.
They're so
So,
bad. They're
so
so bad.
after I had already put this up here, but then, after I had played my game, the trade-off I realized that this list I put down needs to be making, and this is why building with Sybarites is so cool,
Right.
is I need to be turning in two Blissbarb Archers for another Fiend Blood, and then running a Slakehorn with the extra 5 points um,
Yeah.
that brought up for me. So then
Yep.
you'd get to run a full pack of three Fiend Bloods, the
Yo.
Slakehorn being one of them, and then essentially the other stuff. I think that's a much better place. So the reason I was running them is I really value being resilient to deployment variance. Like, I really
Right.
hate getting auto losses because you just can't affect the battle from where you've been deployed to. Um, so I think it's really crucial to have at least three units that can power project. So like your list is doing this with the Slakehorn, Slake Slash, and Hadzu. If you put them in
Yep.
three different deployment groups, you're never going to have just a pure auto loss on deployment.
Yeah, which is what I did.
Um,
Yep.
and so that was my reason for wanting the archers, was to get more numbers and not have any auto losses. And that was before I
Yeah.
realized I could just run a whole pack of three Fiend Bloods and essentially
Yeah.
have the same
And I
the
think
same list.
honestly that three Fiendblood list is probably better than what I had there. I didn't have three Fiendbloods available actually. I just had, as you can see with my parentheses there, that list was a lot of the decisions in that list were informed by what I had painted at the time. I actually didn't even have the Twin Soul with Lash. I
Hmm.
took the Twin Soul, the one that has like the like little mini flail morning star thing
Yep,
and
yep.
the hook claw. I took him and I was just like, hey, he has a chain weapon. Can I use him as a flash? And my opponent was like, yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
of course.
So yeah, I actually really like your idea of doing, and maybe our list can kind of coalesce and some of the ideas that we have. My idea of not running Bliss Barb Archers because
Yeah.
why are you running them?
Yeah, I think you were
And your
right
idea of kind of
to smack me
yeah,
around for putting
yeah,
even
your
putting this
idea of
on the
kind of
screen.
yeah, of kind of maximizing the Slangor Fiendbloods, who I think, yeah, totally Slake Slash is worse than a Slangor Slakehorn. He does one more crit but loses a bunch of things.
Hmm.
So you remove Slake Slash, you go up, yeah, you go up the Slangor Fiendblood, and you go to the Slakehorn, and then you have your three Fiendbloods, one for each deployment zone. And you can also, at that point, even do like three Fiendbloods, one for each. One of them gets Hadzu, one of them gets a twin soul with Lash, one of them gets Glacette, and then you have these three kind of major threats that you're projecting power around. But you also have these three like secondary supportive units that each go in each zone. So yeah, I think that list would be really interesting.
And setting it up the way you said is getting more and more important as more scenarios are being unpredictable. Which deployment group is going to be on board? When Warcry started, you could essentially, I think it was like over 70% of the time your shield would be on board turn one, and so that allowed you to make a lot of really sometimes fun gimmick lists that are only fun once.
Yeah, like my Skaven deployment that I always do of literally I just have all the clan rats and the claw leader in the shield. I just move them up and activate fight from the back, and like they just blend things. Like I don't think that's quite as viable anymore because of if they don't start, that's like half your warband, and then you just have like a few giant rats for the first round.
Yeah, or for a while there's a living city ability that lets you like really pump through the roof certain ranged attack profiles.
Oh, yep.
And that list has been nerfed like 3 times now, but
the eco dwarves.
Yeah, my eco dwarves list,
Yep.
where you basically bet on the shield being there round one, and then just like blow out. You get like 34 damage on average.
Oh, jeez.
But you don't
Wow.
get that anymore because
Right.
one, your chance of being on board turn one is much lower. It's like down to 60% now, and then also all those ranged things went up in points, and then they said it was other visible fighters, so now the leader can't
The leader
buff
can't do
themselves.
it.
So
Yeah. It's
yeah.
yeah. And then so the other thing I'll just go over real quick. I think you can take with my list or with your list. I like the pack of 3 Fiend Bloods, but I think like you can make an argument for taking Slakehorn versus Vasilak versus Lord of Pain. Like they're all in that same range. There's trade-offs for each.
Yeah.
I have Hadzu on here. We already covered Hadzu way back when. Super overperformed for me. I had kind of been leaving him out of my Sybarites list for the most part. He was the one member of the Dread pageant that I wasn't taking. And I think that I'll probably take him going forward in most of my lists. I think he was really good.
Yeah.
It's nice to have that 15-inch range. It's nice when your big units don't do the math well and leave a chaff unit on like 1 health. It's nice to have him 15 away. Just
Yep.
Yeah. So Hadzu, great unit. I think he's everything that the Blitzbarb Archers aren't.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So let's talk about getting into Slaanesh.
Okay.
I think that there's 5 ways to sort of start a Slaanesh warband for Warcry. 5 legitimate ways. The other way, the illegitimate way, which is what I did, of buying enough models for an AOS army and then just only painting some of them.
All right, $210. Let's go get the really big Mortals box that I don't think it has Fiend Bloods. I don't know. I don't know if it has any.
3 of them. Yeah.
Okay, fine. That's good enough. Oh, and then on top of that, let's buy the Dread pageant. Because need those. Yeah. No. All right. So yeah, get into it.
So you can do the start collecting. So starting with demons, the start collecting box, the Slaanesh Demons, you get Seekers, Demonettes, and a Herald in there for 95. All of these are a little bit more expensive than I think a lot of the cheapest factions to get into in the game.
Yeah, I think also they're a little bit better than a lot of the cheaper factions lists. Like you will just, if you're just playing casually, and I mean, it depends on the board a little bit, but you will run over people with Seekers.
Yeah. It is, like you said, super board dependent, but if you're on like the, God, what is the forest board called?
I know the one you're talking about.
Yeah.
The forest, just the trees.
That one's just the ultimate cavalry board, right? So like Seekers are
fun
gonna be
thing.
incredible there.
Yeah, my first match was on a pretty standard Warcry, like old school, like first, Warcry starter set Warcry board with pretty minimal terrain. And the objective was, hey, get off the board edge. The attacker has to kill the defender from getting off the board edge, and
Yep.
I was Slaanesh with like 3 Seekers up against Iron Golems.
Oh no.
Yeah, I think I might have even won on like round 2 or something.
Oh
It
man.
was not it was a pretty terrible. It's also why I could go on a long tirade about how much I hate those escape the board edge objectives because I hate them, and it was not a good introduction to Warcry. But
Sure.
hey, yeah, my point being, Seekers are really fast. They're really cheap for being really fast. Demonettes are really good. Like, you can never go wrong with just a Demonette spam list.
Yeah.
It'll be a little bit weak to like those big dragons, but eh.
And then for
But
the
you're missing the epitome
yeah,
and
so
the fiends.
a quick way to get the epitome and a playable band is the Broken Realms box. But what do you think about getting into Warcry with a box that doesn't have demonettes?
I think that with some clever green stuff work and some clever basing, you can unmount those Seekers and make them into Demonettes pretty effectively.
Okay, okay. I didn't even think of just throwing away the little seekers on them and just right because
I
they're
mean, keep
not.
the Seekers to repose for some of the Chariots or
Oh,
something.
sure. Okay.
But or to use as their, I think they'd be great. I think it'd be great to have like a Keeper of Secrets that has like 1 or 2 Seekers that are kind of
Hmm.
like bounding after him.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, no,
The seekers have much
that was
scarier
my
claws too.
suggestion.
Hmm.
Yeah, that was my suggestion always in the Warcry Discord when that
Hmm.
box first came out was get the box, dismount the Seekers, use some basing or uh, leg swap or, I don't know,
Or
like
just
cut
say
off
they're
the legs and make
practicing
them
leg
look
day
like
and that's why
they,
they're
yeah,
squatting.
yeah. People do it all the time for the Hellstriders to
Yeah.
make Slaaneshi Chaos Marauders. Like, you can do it pretty easily.
Okay.
The downside of the box is just finding it for box value, finding it for $90.
Right.
eBay is great for that. I think you can still find that one pretty easily on eBay, but it is something to consider is that, like, as this video gets older and older, like we're going to talk about the Warcry box, some of these things go out of production and then might cost a bit more.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Broken Realms Exquisite Pursuit, I'd say if you can find it, that's probably the best way to get a competitive list. If you're willing to unmount the Seekers.
Yeah. And then as it gets harder and harder to find, I do think demonettes, just a box of demonettes and a box of fiends, I think
Yep.
is a great and serviceable way to do it. I know you don't have
Yep.
the contorted that way, but you know.
It gives you the Blissbringer, which I
Yep.
mean we've already said is like in a lot of cases just close enough.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Um, like a lot of the people who are watching this, I'm sure, won't necessarily be playing like Adepticon or like
Mm-hmm.
super high competitive Warcry.
Right.
So yeah, Demoness plus Fiend, Blissbringer, great list, plays really well. You'll love it
Yeah.
if you like that style.
So then going to the mortals,
Oh yeah,
it can be really tough, right? Because
they're
it's
new.
the dread pageant. Well, yeah, they're new. The dread pageant is not as cheap as some of the other underworlds things because it was in the combo box.
Yeah,
Um,
you can find it online for a decent deal.
yeah.
I mean, it's especially nice if you want to get into Underworlds. Like, that starter set is 1 season old now, but it's still fine.
Yeah.
You can probably find a deal on it, honestly, now that like the boards are rotated out or whatever.
Oh, sure. It's probably more available now than it was. And that
Yeah,
armor box is so expensive on its own. You get
the
five
armor
pieces of
box,
plastic. Yep. And
which the
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 Twin
Twin
Souls
Souls
and
and
the
Mirmadash
Painbringers.
box
They're in the
are
same
okay. I see
box.
the armored unit, the infantry box.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
yeah. um,
Yeah, it really is. Like it's priced about the same as the Seeker box. I think it's priced exactly the same as the Seeker box and the Bliss Barb box, and
hmm
it's way less plastic.
Yeah.
Worth
Um,
it plastic. I think those sculpts are really best. I think those sculpts are like best in Sybarites,
yeah. Um,
especially the Painbringers.
yeah, I'm excited to paint mine. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah,
Um, so so I do think that if you can put those two together, it sort of gives you a pretty respectable list. It's
yeah.
what I actually just played yesterday while playing,
Hmm.
um, while playing Slaanesh for this video was the armor box plus dread pageant because I wanted to talk to what you could do here. Basically,
Right.
you know,
Well, the other thing about Dread Pageant is
hmm
that sometime down the road they might release that as an Age of Sigmar box, like they've done with some of the old
right.
Underworld boxes,
I'd
and
be
then you might
shocked
be
if
able
they
to get it
didn't.
for like
Yeah.
$30,
Yeah. hmm
which at that point I think is just an amazing deal.
Yeah.
Because the Dread Pageant, as we've kind of been talking about, is really kind of the meat and bones of this of Sybarites.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think,
Even if it's just Hadz, I mean, even if you can just get Hadzu and Glissette off of eBay, I think those two are the ones you're most likely going to use. But
right.
Vasilak and Slake Slash are also very good.
Yeah, and both of them sort of give their own kind of utility. You can just run the whole Dread
Yep.
Pageant really well. I do
Yep.
think, yeah, the Dread Pageant plus armor, a mix and match of Twin Souls and Painbringers, I think is a really solid
Yeah.
entry into them. Uh,
Yeah.
you
And I
have,
mean,
you have
we're
a,
not
oh,
we're not really, both of us are kind of not really narratively minded, but I think
hmm
the Dread Pageant would also be really fun to run in like a more like narrative campaign too.
absolutely. hmm
Because I know they have like special rules with like they get to come back without having to roll any like wounds,
Yeah.
like any disability
Oh,
saves
for
or whatever.
campaigns, yes.
Yeah, for campaigns. Yep,
They
narrative.
don't get the
They can't
whatchamacallit,
they
but
can't take artifacts,
hmm
but they also don't have to make injury rolls. That's what I was trying to
right, right.
say.
So if
Yeah.
you did a
Okay.
campaign where Vasilek just wasn't your only leader, um,
Yeah.
you could,
It'd be
and we,
fun.
yeah, and we've already talked about, a bunch of other good leaders in Sybarites, and
Yeah.
you could have a
Yep.
really great
There's a lot of
campaign.
good leaders.
So this kind of goes into the Bliss Barb Archer combo, so we don't have to spend a ton of time on the Warcry box. I think I agree with
Yeah.
you. It's not a great start for Warcry. I think it's a
It's
much
not a
better
great
AOS
start.
box.
I think that so you have do you like the ego pump? Short answer, yes, I do.
Hmm
I think that you can do a very different list as long as you're willing to accept that it's not going to be the most competitive list.
Right.
And I think that the ego pump is actually the place where the bliss barbs are going to be the best, that you're going to get the most use out of them.
hmm
So I've kind of concepted this list a few times. The ego pump has the quad. I mean, the twin souls in general have the quad, where they get to make an extra move or attack action.
Yep.
And then if they take another fighter down, they get to do it again, and it kind of just goes as many times as you can kill fighters. So the
So wait,
Bliss
I want to
Barbs.
guess. Are you gonna
Okay, yeah.
say use Bliss Barbs to kind of like throw a lot of damage all over the
Yep.
place? Nice.
Yep.
Okay.
Bliss
Nice.
Barbs. Use them like you use them in Age of, like when you use them for depravity point farming in Age of Sigmar.
hmm
Just get pepper damage, may soften things up for the ego pump and the twin souls, basically.
Nice.
That's not a good list, but if you're like a Johnny type player, like Johnny
Yep.
psychographic player, if you're really into like cool synergies and combos, I think you'll have fun with it. The ego pump, the quad is almost always worse than Rampage, but what isn't?
I
Uh,
think it's the perfect list for playing against, say, like out of the box OG Warcry war bands
yeah,
or
which I
stuff
mean
like
is
that.
fair for the
hmm
work for it being a Warcry box. Kind of
Yeah.
sucks that you have to pay $80 for it versus like 50 for Untamed Beasts or Canite
Yeah.
Shadowstalkers or whatever.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, that's one. I would say that's a good one with like an asterisk.
Right.
Sybarites are not going to be cheap to get into. Also, the other thing about demons is I think that you can find a lot of things on eBay for less than we have those prices for as
Absolutely.
well.
Especially Demonettes.
Yeah,
You can
single
get,
models.
yeah,
Yeah,
really crazy. And just a
yeah,
random pile of 10, like mushed up in a pile demonettes for like
yeah.
$10. That kind of thing
Uh-huh.
pops up on eBay all the time,
Yeah.
with
Whereas
demonettes.
Sybarites, they're newer. Like Sybarites are not going to be cheap to get into.
Yeah.
You just accept that when
Yeah.
you decide that you want to play them. But yeah,
Demonettes are so funny because when you see them on eBay, it's either like $10 for just a random pile of demonettes bits, or it's like $100 for the Juan Diaz ones because
yeah, because
there's
everyone loves
people out there
those.
looking for them. Yeah.
Uh, so I would say that Sybarites, honestly, and we're talking about how to get into Slaanesh, so this
Hmm.
doesn't really. But I would say the best way to get into Sybarites is to have gotten really excited about the models when they got previewed, bought all of the models for Age of Sigmar, realized, wait, these suck,
Uh-huh.
and then bring them over to Warcry, which is kind of what I did.
Yep, yep.
Yeah, so
This is the way.
uh, this is the way. This is the way for if you are a disenfranchised Slaanesh
Yeah.
Age of Sigmar player who shelved all of their Slaanesh models because hey, I don't blame you, and did like I don't know Legion of the First Prince, I think was the one that I was looking to do or something
Yep,
like
yep.
that. It is a great place to get those models off the shelves, dust them off. You know, they the sculpts are amazing and they play. You know, they're fun in Warcry. They're not the most competitive, but they sure are fun, and I can't say that for Age of Sigmar Slaanesh.
Yeah, I'm gonna post this in the Facebook, in the Slaanesh Facebook group, and that'll be exactly my pitch. Um,
Yeah, yeah, it's a
all
good
right,
pitch.
so let's
Hey,
go straight to just talking about our stuff.
all
So
right.
you've got some incredible conversions here. Where did you find those heads, by the way, for those fiends?
Uh, okay, so those heads actually come from Conquest: Last Argument of Kings by
Okay.
Parabellum
Mm-hmm.
Studios or whatever. It's a game that my local game store has really been pushing and really trying to get a scene for and doing a pretty good job of.
Okay.
I don't like the anteater heads, and I kind of wanted to evoke a little bit of the old like Warhammer Fantasy Necrosphinx
Yeah.
aesthetic here,
Mm-hmm.
but with a Slaaneshi twist on it.
Yeah.
So I think I call these my exalted fiends.
Yeah. They're incredible.
I think, yeah, I really, really love these models.
Yeah.
The contorted epitome is my other favorite. I
Mm-hmm.
had to move the tentacles and move one of the demonettes a little bit to fit the third herald in there, but I
And
think
that's
she
creature
looks just
caster, right?
stunning. Yep, that's the creature caster,
Mm-hmm.
priestess of ecstasy. And I like that model a lot because even without her, the contorted is kind of like a diorama model, like you
Yeah.
see with like Catacross, which is something that you don't get to see a lot in Warcry because everything's really small. So
Right.
it's or the the Blood Rack Shrine, like
Yep.
those type of models.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, so it's really nice to have that here.
Cool. Yeah, that's awesome. Just great to see. And also, yeah, I just like you chose kind of the an almost bluish skin tone, and so it's like
Yep.
yes, there's a lot of purple, but there's a lot of gold too, and it's funny. So, uh, peek behind the curtain for people. You sent me these maybe minutes
I
before we
did.
started
Yep.
recording, and it's so
Yep.
funny because I had already prepped this section where you'll help me decide a color scheme, and you'll
Uh-huh.
see. We'll see. We'll save the surprise for other slides, but so okay, so this was basically my first sort of go at Slaanesh a couple
Yeah.
years ago, where I decided every single one was going to have a different color scheme,
Uh-huh.
which backfired because it was really
Yeah.
fun at first, and then it was
I I
really
can
draining.
tell. Look, these look like models that are like almost there, and then you very clearly got sick of it.
Yes.
Like we're looking at this fiend on the well, like all the fiends, like their tongues aren't painted. Like,
Hmm.
yeah, I can see it. They're lacking the like finish
Yes. And the reason
for
they're lacking
sure.
the finish, like you said, is because I didn't. I was just
Yeah.
exhausted. I was exhausted from thinking of a
Uh-huh.
different way to paint every single thing. I've got,
Yeah.
10 demonettes here. I've got the, what's the, there's like a giant man and a demonette is riding him.
Zaleski,
Selesky, there we go.
the Vengeful Allegiance,
Yep, so I've
I
got
think.
Selesky is painted where
Oh
he's
yeah.
got a different color scheme than, or like
Oh
Sil has a
no.
different color scheme than
Oh
Esky, and
no.
they both got different color schemes than
Do
these.
I have to, I should send you videos on color theory
Yeah, so
painting,
like,
like very discordant. Which I mean, maybe
mhm.
like that could work
So
for Slaanesh.
my idea for it was I would usually do everything in the red to purple range with gold on the other side,
Yep.
and it would just be each would be a different execution. The problem was it just doesn't read quite the same as I
Yeah,
had
it
hoped.
doesn't. It reads as models. that you have that you are painting for different projects?
Yes. Um, so now I wanted to get into making a mood board for.
Okay.
So
I
we
like this
talked
mood board already.
ages ago about you
Yep.
telling me about Evelyn skins. Um,
Yeah,
as
so you
mhm.
yeah, Evelyn skins. You don't have the one up here that I actually used. It's the one in the bottom left. It's the regular. That is like the prestige. That's the fancy version of that skin. I
Uh-huh.
use the regular version.
Okay.
Which is that purple, which is that like purple and gold and like
Yes.
kind of that with the hair, like that kind of maroon purple color.
Uh-huh.
Moi, I don't really know what you would call that. But yeah, kind of that color. That's really where I started and then kind of just embellished. Um,
And then it's funny because I've got that led me into sort of other League of Legends skins
yeah,
as this. So I've got a sort of Frost Archer Ash skin here, and
yep.
it made me look more at Ash. And this Evelyn skin has a lot of the same principles as actually this Frost Archer skin does.
Yeah, it does.
Um, so the reason I laughed when you showed me what you sent is because what I landed on is actually incredibly similar to what you're doing with um, sort of a lot of sort of subtle. You have a lot of desaturated blues, and
Yep.
then
A lot of that
gold.
is just a lot of that is like just like uh Pallid Witch Flesh
Hmm.
or no, what's the other one? Not Grayseer. There's another one, kind of in that gray. Maybe it is Grayseer. Like Grayseer with just like a very basic blue toner, blue wash over it, very lightly done.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
So
very desaturated.
I don't know if I'm going to do. And so the other thing I like is and you did this too, is sort of purple undertones and accents, even though the
Yep.
primary color scheme is blue and gold.
Yeah.
Blue and gold just complement each other so well, and then sort of purple as an
Yeah. Mine are a
undertone.
little bit more on the purple end of
That's
things, but
true.
I have that big blue on the mirror. I went with like the big blue, and that mirror is actually it's got it's got water effect over it, like that water effect that you can get for basing, where it's
Uh
like
huh.
yeah, it's got that on it.
It works well as
Uh,
just a instant
yeah.
shininess, but not
Yeah,
metallic
I
effect.
and then yeah, the blue in the skin, I guess if you want to count that as
Hmm.
primary for sure. Yeah, I can see. And then the purple around the clothes. So
Yeah.
I think I like the idea of you doing demonettes with blue clothes. I think that blue is really underused for Slaanesh, and I think it complements them really well.
Yeah, and
And
I'm
it goes
hoping.
really well with gold.
Yeah, so I'm hoping I'll have like still probably the purple skinned demonettes, but with blue
Uh-huh.
clothes and this kind of Evelyn flash blonde that sort of some of these frost art
Yeah.
this
So
ash skin has too.
almost a the blonde I like too. Almost a reverse of my demonettes where I've got the blue skin and the purple clothes.
Mm-hmm.
Where you've got the blue. Yeah, I think that could really work.
And then I'll transition into having the Sybarites. Then we'll just have human skin, but then still
Right.
with this kind of blue and purple
Yeah.
and gold here. So
Yeah, I didn't post
I'm
any of
excited
my
for it.
Sybarites, but mine were I went very hard on the contrast between like kind of gunmetal silver
Uh huh.
versus like kind of that stormcast. That's my favorite gold. I use it pretty much anytime that I use gold is that
Yeah.
dark retributor gold. I love that gold. I think it just pops really nicely and
Yeah.
it takes like Null Oil or like Blood for the Blood God, like any of those kind of effect washes, it takes them so well.
Nice.
Uh, yeah, I so my Sybarites are very, and then I have a lot of green on my Sybarites, whereas I don't have as much green on my demons.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah, so I think that yeah, blue demons. I love blue demons. I think that especially like blue demonettes, I think is super underutilized. People tend to go and if I showed you my keeper, you would see too. Like people tend to go very much just like varying shades of purple, which works.
Yeah.
And I like my keeper because she is like a bigger model, so I got to do a lot of varying kind of contrast shades of purple on her.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, for the little models especially, I like having I like having almost more color than the big models
Hmm.
because I think that you need to really make them stand out, especially for a game like Warcry, where it's all about the chaff. It's all
Yeah.
about the little guys. You in
Yeah.
model by model activation. I've given all my demonettes names.
Oh, nice.
Uh, yeah. So yeah, I like your color idea.
So looking forward to this. It might take me a year to actually put any of it on the table because
I feel
got
that.
whole bunches of other
I
stuff. But
yeah. I am working. I'm in school. I
yeah.
just bought a car. I feel it.
Um, but yeah, I'm excited for it. So this has been, I think we've covered every single aspect of it. We've done, the lists, the individual models, even the hobby side. So
Yeah.
I'm excited at where we've landed. Um,
Hey, Merry Slaaneshmas.
yeah, Merry Slaaneshmas to all, and yeah, I'll come back into the channel with more strategic Warcry videos in the future. Until then, may all your rolls be crits.